Okay, let's dive in. Today we're peeling back the layers on an artist whose work, well, it feels like it does more than just hang on a wall. It sort of invites you into a conversation. We're focusing this deep dive on the really unique artistic world of Haviva Goldfarb. Now we've got some fascinating source material here, descriptions of her art, her process, her thinking. And our mission, really, is to use these notes to get a handle on her abstract style. We want to explore those emotional, maybe even spiritual layers she works into her canvases, get a sense of her journey, and try to understand why her art seems to connect so deeply with people. Basically, unpack her vision and hopefully help you feel that connection too. So the sources introduce Haviva Goldfarb as an abstract Israeli artist. She works mainly with acrylic on canvas. And right off the bat, the descriptions that jump out mention this incredible richness. Abundant brushstrokes, really vibrant colors, a very sort of material quality to the paint. It sounds like someone who really knows their craft, displaying real mastery.
Yeah, and that mastery is interesting because, as the sources point out, her paintings aren't just meant to be, glanced at. They demand a bit more. They actually require some interpretation from the viewer.
Interpretation. How so?
Well, the word that keeps coming up is excavation, because she builds up these layers of paint physically, but there are also these emotional layers underneath. So you're kind of invited to dig in, to look closer beyond just the surface.
Excavation.
Yep.
That sounds pretty central.
Yeah.
The sources actually talk about this core dynamic in her work, this dialectic of construction and destruction, rooted in what they call archaeological origin.
Right, archaeological origins. That phrase is really telling, isn't it? It suggests it's not just a technique, it's fundamental to how she thinks. She builds layers up, often thickly. But then she actually takes away, she removes, disassembles, kind of reworks those layers. So it's this constant back and forth, creating, undoing, building, revealing. And the sources say that's where the emotional depth comes from. You're not just seeing the end result, you're seeing the painting's history almost, its making and unmaking. That's why you, the viewer, have to excavate. You're uncovering the process, the feeling embedded right there.
So it's like she's painting the story of the painting itself in a way. That's fascinating.
And speaking of digging deeper, the sources mention another layer, Jungian psychology. How does that fit in?
Well, this is where the deep dive gets really compelling, I think. Jungian psychology, with its focus on archetypes, the collective subconscious, it shifts the art from being purely personal to something more universal.
Okay.
The sources explain that Haviva seems to explore these shared human patterns, these deep symbols or instincts we all kind of recognize. But she doesn't do it literally. It's more through subtle hints, traces, signs. One source calls it a personal writing within the painting.
Like a hidden language.
Sort of, yeah. So her very personal process, the layering, the excavating, becomes a way to connect to something bigger, linking her own inner journey to, well, the shared human experience. Wow. So the layers are physical paint, but also layers of process, history, maybe even shared human memory.
Exactly. And visually, the sources say the result is incredibly rich. They talk about these vibrant, sometimes really intense colors, thick textures, paint overlapping. It creates this real, almost tangible sense of depth.
Like you could almost step into it.
Or fall into it, maybe. It's not flat. It feels immersive.
And the sources directly link that richness to this idea of an inner journey, right? You look and you feel drawn inward.
Precisely. It's quite amazing how she uses fairly straightforward materials, acrylic, canvas, but her skill, her intention, turns them into something so layered and meaningful. And the sources really stress that her process is not linear.
Not A to B to C.
Not at all. It's described as more complex, like different sensory things happening at the same time, existing in different inner times all at once in the painting. So it's A and B and C, all coexisting, interacting in the work, and potentially in how you experience it.
That non-linear idea, the simultaneous time, adds another layer to the excavation idea. You're digging through different moments, maybe, not just paint.
That's a great way to think about it.
The sources also mention a philosophical side, saying the texts that accompany her exhibitions often make you think.
Yes, and they clarify what kind of thinking. These texts, much like the art, seem to push for a deconstruction, a rethinking of creative processes. both hers and maybe, by extension, our own ways of seeing and understanding.
So it reinforces the connection between how she makes the art and the deeper questions she's exploring.
Exactly. It's all about asking how things come into being, how meaning is made, what's really going on beneath the surface.
Okay, so her abstract style seems to sit right there at that crossroads, looking back, looking forward, making something new, using these subtle signs, this personal writing, to build her own visual language.
And the sources are absolutely clear. Within that language, color is primary. It's her main tool. They describe it as both writing and emotional music.
Emotional music, I like that.
It's powerful, isn't it? Color conveying specific feelings or ideas like musical notes or words. And through this language of color and her interest in those archetypes, she's trying to create this really deep emotional bridge to the viewer.
Tapping into something fundamental.
Right. Connecting to basic human experiences, that collective consciousness. And it's important, the sources note, she deliberately tries to simplify concepts. She avoids telling a story or painting a recognizable picture.
She is not painting of something.
Exactly. She's trying to get to the authentic essence of painting itself, using color as the direct line.
Color is writing and emotional music. It really suggests color carries information, carries feeling on a level beyond just what we see.
Absolutely. Which brings us to another key point from the sources. Her focus on the inner structure of color. She's kind of freeing color from its everyday job, you know? Blue isn't just sky, green isn't just grass.
She's letting color be itself.
Pretty much. Treating color as the subject, exploring its own qualities, its relationships, separate from representing the world out there.
And what happens when color is liberated like that? What's the effect?
Well, according to the sources, it becomes a pathway. A pathway to those inner archetypes, to shifts in consciousness, to the raw traces of emotion. Her paintings aren't just still images. They're described as fields of energetic forces and experiential layers.
Wow, fields of energy.
Yeah. Her way of working with color is seen as organic, alive, powerful. It involves that constant building up and tearing down we talked about. Past colors showing through, influencing the present. It creates this real dynamism, this energy within the painting. It feels active.
It sounds like the colors themselves have a kind of life, a history. And we actually get a peek into her own thinking on this, don't we? There's that quote from her sketchbook in '92.
Ah, yes, that quote. It's really revealing. She talks about her philosophy, saying things like, painting is a living experience, and then color in depth is open to autonomous experience. Autonomous color.
Autonomous color. Color acting on its own.
Exactly. It supports that idea of color having its own life. And then she discusses the artist's role. The touch of color must not be manipulative. It must be in the place where the color itself speaks.
The color speaks.
It's quite profound, isn't it? The artist isn't imposing, they're listening. And she goes on, painting itself is not passive. A person is drawn inward, taking part in the creation.
Okay, wait. A person is drawn inward, taking part in the creation. That's aimed right at you, the listener, the viewer, isn't it?
Yeah.
She follows up with, the viewer must be open to feel the place of the painting as an experiential zone, not just an aesthetic frame. So it's not just something pretty for the wall.
Yeah.
It's an invitation. Step inside the painting into this experiential zone. You're meant to be active, drawn in by the color that speaks, and you actually become part of the creative act yourself. It totally changes the usual viewer role.
Yeah, flips the script, as you say. And you can kind of trace how these ideas develop through her exhibitions mentioned in the sources, like dialogue too, that show focus specifically on text and writing, using symbols as language.
Right, the personal writing.
Exactly. But then it seems the idea of language shifted more towards color itself than there was on the edge, exploring boundaries, maybe those points of transition, physical edges in the paint, or maybe those edges of consciousness she probes.
Interesting.
And the show called simply Layers. Well, that directly hits on her core technique, showing off that visual richness, the color flow, described as a refined invitation to visual delight and spiritual enrichment.
Sounds beautiful.
Does it? And her solo exhibition in Tel Aviv seems to pull a lot of this together. Color, texture, emotion, what's called visual lyricism, that musical quality of color. Even a review mention by Sarah Cohen Bonin calls it active art, connecting it back to core ideas about emotional painting. It really shows a consistent, deepening exploration over her career.
It really does paint a picture, forgive the pun, of an artist deeply investigating her own language and ideas over time. So we pull all these threads together, the layers, excavation, young, color as language, the active viewer. How do the sources ultimately sum up Haviva Goldfarb?
Well, the conclusion they draw is that she's really more than just an abstract painter. She's described as a researcher of individuality and community.
A researcher? That's an interesting term for an artist.
It is, but it feels right based on everything we've discussed, doesn't it? She's researching what makes us unique, but also what connects us those archetypes, that shared emotional space she accesses through color.
So color is her research tool.
In a way, yes, her language. And the canvas becomes this stage for life, emotions, and experiences created from nothing. Her paintings are meant to provoke human questions, not give simple answers. They act as emotional and visual catalysts.
Catalysts, sparking something in the viewer.
Right, and they manage this incredible balance, depth and simplicity, vibrant color, and serious thought.
And that's why this deep dive matters to you, the listener. It reveals an artist whose work is intentionally designed to engage your feelings, connect with your inner world, and link you to those big human questions she's exploring. It's like a personal yet universal conversation happening on the canvas, just waiting for you to tune in. So recapping what the sources told us. We've explored Haviva Goldfarb's really distinct artistic voice. It's defined by that layered technique mirroring construction and destruction, her exploration of Jungian ideas, her powerful use of color as both language and emotional music, and this idea of art as an inner journey where you become an active participant in an experiential zone.
Yeah, and what really sticks with you, I think, is that line from her sketchbook, the artist's touch needing to find the place where the color itself speaks. And the idea that painting isn't passive, it actively pulls you in, inviting you to take part in its creation.
Which leaves us with a really intriguing thought to ponder, doesn't it? What does it truly mean for color to have its own voice, to speak directly to us? And if we open ourselves up to that, how does it change how we look at art? Does it shift from just observing to actually participating, being drawn into that creative unfolding? It's an invitation, maybe, to listen with our eyes and see what depths we find in the art, and maybe in ourselves, too.